me today. I mean, pleasure to meet you.
Pleasure to meet you too.
Pleasure is mine. I got your Locke Key comic book,
Mm-hmm.
you and Mr. Joe, and it's a wonderful story. It's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to know from the beginning
Mm-hmm.
about your career. I mean, you've been through many stories.
Yes.
So tell us about yours.
Well, my career began in a very odd way at the end of 2002, I think it was, that I tried to crack into comic business in Chile when I was younger, and it's very hard because we don't have a formal comic industry over there. But a couple works I did, I used to give it as sample to different publishers in the world. But that year I got an email from a guy that told me, well, there's a company in the United States called IDW Company, a new comics company, and they're trying to find an artist for a comic book series based on the CSI TV show that was very popular in the US at that moment. Yeah. So then I started sending a couple samples and sort of win a contest against other artists, and that's how I get my very first like professional gig in comics, which was that series. And that was very fun because throughout the entire process of getting that job, I wasn't sure if it was a real offer or a very elaborated prank from a guy that was having fun through the internet. But then after I got the job, I got the first script, and then I saw announced online that there was going to be this CSI comic book drawn by Gabriel Rodriguez, and I realized that it was true. And from then on, I've been working non-stop in comics with IDW Publishing since then. We started with the CSI series that was supposed to be a 5-issue miniseries and a special 48 pages one-shot, and we ended up doing over 26 or 27 comic books that get collected in 5 graphic novels at the end of the day. And for me it was great because it was an amazing training school to get like the craftsmanship of comic work in a daily basis throughout the years. So after that, as I get along really well with my editorial team, I started getting other kinds of projects, and I've been very lucky to jump from different genres, from book to books. So I finished CSI, and then I did an adaptation of George Romero, Land of the Dead, so that was an action-packed zombie tale that was very fun. And also it gave me the opportunity to see for the first time the face of one of the people that I've been working with, because for 4 years I did my entire work via email and I never saw a face of anyone there. But when I was doing Land of the Dead, Chris Ryle, my editor, sent me his mugshot because he wanted to be a zombie in the comics, so he sent it to get the likeness for the character. So it was very fun. It was the very first approach that I see one of the person that I was working with. A couple of years after that, I did my first trip to San Diego Comic Con, where I actually met the people from the editorial. And then I did Land of the Dead, and I did an adaptation of the Beowulf movie written by Neil Gaiman and shot by Robert Zemeckis. And also one of the most interesting projects that I did in that time was the adaptation of Clive Barker's novel The Great and Secret Show, which was the first time that I got the chance to design the entire visual approach to a book. It was sort of my first author approach to a comic book story. Was in a 12 issues miniseries also. That was like the largest project that I tackled from the get-go, and was a very rewarding experience because Clive, who he's very fond of that book, and he was so happy with what we were doing with the comic book. Chris Ryle was adapting the comic as a writer, and I did all the art, and from the get-go, like, Clive gave us absolute freedom to approach the book in the way we thought was the more adequate way to adapt it to comic book. Yeah, and he was so happy at the end of the book that he wrote us this beautiful introduction to the book, telling that The Great Secret Show was at the point that just not Clive Barker's story, but also a story that he shared with Chris Ryle and Gabriel Rodriguez. So that's one of the most flattering things I've ever heard from an author. And then I got the chance to do Locke Key with Joe Hill.
So tell us about the idea of Locke Key. How was your meeting with Joe Hill?
Yeah.
And how actually when you knew that it would become a TV series?
Yeah, it has been an amazing journey, because the first approach that I got Locke Key, I remember I was finishing, I think the project that I did just before Locke Key was the adaptation of Beowulf. And when I was finishing that book, I got an email from the editor that told me, well, we got this new writer that has written a novel that just became a New York Times bestseller, that was Heart-Shaped Box, that just break a couple months before Joe sent the pitch for Locke Key. And Chris wrote me, you have to check this pitch because I think this story is perfect for you to draw it. And then I got only 2 pages from Joe Hill. One of those was a characters list, the main characters of the first miniseries. I think it was like 6 or 7 characters, described only in 3 lines. And then a page in which in 3 paragraphs you have like a description of the concept and the plot proposal for Locke Key. And I read it and then immediately fell in love with it because the story of Locke Key has sort of the vibe of the comics that Vertigo Comics published in the 90s, especially influenced by all the British authors that were working in the US at that time, like Neil Gaiman, Alan Moore, Grant Morrison, that generation of writers. And when I got into comics, my dream was to be able to one day do a comic book series in that sort of vibe. So when I got the proposal of Locke Key, immediately realized that, well, if this was published in the 90s, probably it went to be published by Vertigo Comics, and now I have the chance to do my own thing with something like that. And then Chris put me in contact with Joe. We started sharing emails. I immediately realized that we have both the same approach to stories, characters, the same passion about the same kind of books. And also, Joe immediately asked me, if this is going to become a long series, will you be up to do it for the entire ride? And I remember that the only question I asked is, of course I would do, but only if this is a story that's going to have a beginning, a middle, and an end, because I want to tell an entire story that closes. And Joe told me, yes, I have already an idea for that. So we immediately fell in love with this stuff. Luckily, I started sending my sketches and my designs for the keys, the characters, and the house. And Joe immediately felt that it was what he was looking for from the artist of the story. And it all flowed very naturally from that on. So we started working in Locke Key in the first miniseries, not knowing if we would be able to extend it to a long run. Joe always tells the joke that he convinced IDW that if the first miniseries wouldn't do well, he would be able to wrap the story in another 6-issue miniseries and close it up in 12 issues. Luckily, we didn't need to do that, and we ended up doing the entire 37 issues throughout 7 years. And then what was really amazing, that even if we knew that this was a good story with very engaging characters and everything, this is the sort of independent comic book experiment that doesn't always work well with an audience. Yeah. So when, especially from book 2 on, when we're starting like having this amazing feedback from readers and our readership start growing and growing, Locke Key becomes something bigger and way more successful than we ever hoped for it to be. So when it came, for example, the first optioning of Locke Key to try to make a movie or a TV series, was something that really surprised us, because we never expected for it to be something like that. So having the chance to right now see this story starting to get a new version through the eyes of other artists that are trying to adapt it to other media is as flattering and exciting as it could be for us as authors of the series. Because even though we're very happy with what we did in the book and it's finished and our story was told in the way we wanted to, it's always exciting to see that creative and talented people is so in love with the story that you make that they want to make their own version of it. So we're very happy and tremendously humbled by the chance of it to become a new thing through the eyes of other creators.
Amazing. For the upcoming TV series of the story, will it be like heavily involved, or like you like the supervision of the project?
Well, luckily the people that are developing the projects are so in love with the graphic novel that they come to us frequently as advisors for the show, and Joe has a very close involvement with it because he's leading the writers team. Nice. So he already wrote the pilot episode himself, and I think the second episode, and probably is going to write the last of the first season if the series goes on the air, because even though it's in very serious development process, with TV show, you never know if they're actually going to happen until the contract is signed and the first episode airs. This is a very a very weird field of business. But so far the thing is progressing in a very natural way, and Joe is leading the writers team. And for filming the pilot, all the art department people constantly wrote me emails asking me about a reference to start working with. For example, the design of the keys was done exactly like the design of the keys that I did for the comic book. So for me has been tremendously flattering, because I know that all the people involved in the art department of the pilot are really talented and good at their craft. So for them to be so obsessed in being as loyal as possible to the visual language of the comic book has been tremendously flattering for me. So yeah, we are involved because the people in this kind of adaptations, you can have it both ways. Sometimes the guys that are producing it don't want the original creators involved in the project. In this case has been absolutely the same. They have been asking us to participate as much as possible in it because they want to be as truthful as possible to the original approach to the story.
Well, you know, there have been many novels and comics been done in TV and movies. But
Yeah.
some of them been successful, being a big fail.
Yeah.
So I believe that the show will be like a huge impact for all of comic fans and stuff. See that their characters and their stories will be on a TV show. I believe something like that. The next question, I heard you have an upcoming project that you will do it I think, yourself. So what's the new about? What's gonna be?
Well, right now I'm working on a new series called Sword of Ages. It's a sci-fi fantasy epic set in the distant past. That's an approach and a retelling of the King Arthur mythology told in a prequel story.
Nice.
Because I since I was very young, I was very fond to mythology from different cultures, and I've always wanted to try to approach one of them in a refreshing way through comic books. So when I got the chance to, for the first time, write and draw a comic book series, I picked that one in order to do this creative experiment. Sword of Ages is also a comic in which I've been able to explore visual and creative things that I've never done before in my other previous graphic novels. So for me, it has been a chance to revisit a lot of European authors that were very influential to me when I was young. So I'm dedicating this work as a love letter of thank you to the work that Alejandro Jodorowsky and Mobius did in the Inkle series and Arsak and in the Meta Baron saga, which were very influential to me. And also to explore themes of mythology, tradition, leadership, and friendship, which are topics that I think are very important to revisit from time to time, that provide a very fertile ground to create exciting adventure stories, hoping to catch this time maybe a younger audience and approach them in a way that's thrilling and exciting and taking topics that I think are very important or relevant today. So it has been a tremendous challenge for me. I've been, from a few years ago, constantly encouraged by my editors to try to write a comic books along as a drawing it, and I just felt like in the last few years I've been like ready to try to do that, because getting your first creative writing gig in a language that's not your own is an extra challenge added to that. But I've been very lucky that I'm working with my longtime editor, Chris Ryle, that has helped me a lot to give shape to the series. And I'm working with an assistant editor called Peter Veravich, which is incredibly talented and has helping me with my English in a way that I feel that this work is like getting a master's degree in English, because he has been incredibly thoughtful in guiding me of what I want to say, in how I say it, picking the exact words and making my characters sound fresh and vivid. And also I'm tremendously blessed of being working in this project with an amazing coloring artist, which is Lovern Sindierski, which was very fun, because the first time that I realized what a colorist brought to a comic book, and I learned the name of a coloring artist, was Lovern Sindierski, because of the work he did in the Sword of Ezreal Batman miniseries back in the 90s with Joe Quesada and Kevin Nolan. So it's really thrilling for me to have the chance to work with him, whose work I admire a lot, especially the stuff that he did, coloring work from Craig Russell in several comic book graphic novels. And also because I wanted to give a European taste in homage to Mobius in the art of this book. And when we contacted Laverne, he told us that he was approached by Mobius workshop in the latest years of him trying to figure out a way for him to color his art, and that didn't happen because of Mobius passing. And so for him to have the chance to work in a comic book like this has been like trying to get back to that track. So it's been like a very magical process. I'm enjoying it a lot. It has been really tough and demanding. I'm just, right now this weekend, I'm finishing writing the last issue of the first Sword of Ages miniseries. I'm drawing the penultimate one right now. So I'm hoping to have the entire series wrapped in a couple months from now. And has been incredibly rewarding, and luckily people seems to be responding really well to the story. So if the support stays on, I'm hoping to keep revisiting this universe in further graphic novels, because we have discussed ideas with the editors for a few graphic novels set in this universe with this story. So
My question is, what's your advice for the new generation of talents who want to write story, and how to make the characters real?
well, I think for me the most important thing when you approach to a story you want to tell and the characters you want to create is to make sure to make them as vivid as possible, because I think people fall in love with a story when they can really engage with the characters. So it's not about the art style, it's not about the genre. The thing is that you need to make your characters look and feel vivid, and that's not about realism, because you could have a very photorealistic graphic style, but if the character doesn't behave in a realistic way, the magic is done. So despite the art style that you want to approach to a story, I think the important thing is that the characters sound vivid and that they move and behave in a realistic way. You may have an artistic style that could be very stylized or comic booky or very synthetic, but if the characters move and react in a realistic way, you get engaged in the story. So I think that the secret is try your best to make the reader fall in love with your characters, and they will be with you along the way throughout the story. And I think that's the only secret. So all you have to do is write and draw your stuff, start sharing with your friends, hear what they think about it, hear if they're engaged. Luckily in these times you can always, even though if you can't find a publisher, ultimately you can post online your work and see how people read and react to them. So I think the only frontier you have to break is your own willingness to do your story and make it out. So
And passionate.
exactly, passion is the driving force here, and it's always hard to get your first publishing gig. And these days, for what I've seen from the editorial world, they only give a shot to try publishing a book from people that has already made a story. They need to see what you can do with the story. They need to see how you build your characters, how you handle your storytelling. So if you want to make comic books, the first step is to actually do comic books. So don't expect to be paid for it at the beginning, but every effort that you make in that direction ends to paying off if you're persistent and you're passionate. So just go for it. Set a team. If you have a friend that loves to write and you love to draw, team with them, start experimenting, and most of all, start drawing your first comic book pages, post it and share them, and then you'll be making comic books immediately. So it's just a thing of passion and persistent, and keep driving your interest for creativity in the most focused way that you can.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.